Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Ladner, and I'm with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you today to today's webinar. On behalf of Kelly Nowitzki-Wetzel from the Pesticide and Fertilizer Program Manager and the entire pesticide and fertilizer team at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into worker protection standards requirements. At the Kansas Department of Agriculture, we strive to protect our state's largest industry, agriculture, and those who work within the industry. Before the session begins, we have a few housekeeping items. During the presentation portion of this session, all participant microphones will be muted by the meeting host. If you have questions during the presentation, please submit those questions utilizing the chat button at the bottom of your screen. KDA staff will be monitoring the chat for questions to be asked at the conclusion of the presentation. Lastly, this session is being recorded and will be posted online next week. At this time, I would like to introduce to you Kent Spoor. Kent is a compliance investigator for the Pesticide and Fertilizer Program and is based in the Wichita area. Kent, I will now turn it over to you to share your presentation.
Good day, all, and welcome to our discussion about pesticide safety and worker protection standards. My name is Kent Spoor, and I've worked for the Kansas Department of Agriculture since 2004. I'm a certified applicator and grew up in Southwest Kansas and Western Colorado. My family homesteaded in Kansas, and a big part of our original homestead was cantaloupes, watermelons, and pumpkins. Even when the 80s came and the homesteads were sold, a huge garden was still part of our life. I now turn it over to our presentation, and thank you, Dana, for that great introduction. Our agenda for today includes a discussion of safe pesticide use, helpful tools for you to use pesticides safely, and what to look out for in case you were exposed to pesticides. Then we will talk about worker protection standard requirements, including what is and if the requirements apply to you and your operation. When someone says the phrases pesticide or pesticide application, what do you think about? Many things come to your mind, such as an aerial applicator or a ground rig spraying a farmer's field. Are you thinking about bees and other pollinators? Do you think about what the person spraying your house to repel spiders or even snakes? What about an insect spray that you use in your garden or growing operation? Do you think about the cleaning products used in and around your home? The Kansas pesticide law defines a pesticide as any mixture or substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest. It is any substance or mixture of substances intended for use as a plant regulator, defoliant, or desiccant. We can use pesticides to protect not only desirable plants, but also insects, pets, and people, as well as keeping nitrogen fertilizer available to plants longer. Pesticides may be as simple as salt, as natural as sulfur, or something borrowed like permethrins, which are naturally found in some chrysanthemum flowers. Just as there are a myriad of risks associated with all things we do in our day-to-day operations, there are risks in using pesticides. Safe pesticide use is important because it reduces the risk to the applicator, the public, and the environment. Certain persons, such as children, are more susceptible to pesticides. With education and training, we can use pesticides safely and protect ourselves, family, friends, customers, and the environment. It only takes one red sock to turn our white laundry pink. Improper use of pesticides is like a red sock. It can have a significant impact on you, other people, and the environment. A pair of pink socks may be easy to hide under jeans and boots, but not so much next to a roadway where all your neighbors can see the wilting plants from an unintended exposure. Just like a new car, tractor, or piece of equipment which comes with an owner's manual, the pesticides products we use to protect our crops from pests also have a manual, the label. As with anything, it is good to start at the beginning and see what information is there to help us to reduce the risk and protect people, crop, and customers. The label will tell you where the pesticide can be used, what pests can be controlled, and what personal protective equipment or PPE is needed. It will give warnings about toxicity to people, plants, fish, and wildlife. There may be directions about wind speed, minimum and maximum limits, and it may provide limits on wind direction limiting where you can or cannot spray. Rates for application are listed so we have just the right amount of product to take care of the pest and do so in a manner that minimizes the amount of product used. This may require you to stay out of the treated area for a few hours to several days, and again put on protective clothing if you have to go in before the REI expires. There is even information about what to do if there's a spill or exposure. Some pesticide products have pollinator protection boxes, so be on the lookout for a picture of a bee. We do not want our application for squash bugs becoming a red sock that eliminates a beehive. Sorting laundry and proper pesticide application have a lot in common. You may want to know, how would I know what PPE to wear? Read the label. By reading the label, we have learned that keeping a barrier between us and possible dangers is always a good thing, and PPE is a dual-purpose tool. As we can see, a long-sleeve shirt and pants are considered PPE. Anyone who deals with blackberries, or if you're like me, okra, these tools are much appreciated items even when a pesticide is not being used. After a close call with a locust tree, safety glasses are an item I use every day. Those of us who wear glasses may find that we also need to provide side, brow, and temple protection to meet label requirements. It is also important to remember that sometimes PPE may vary from mixing and loading to applying. The goal of PPE is to prevent things that we do not want in or on our bodies. Be sure to follow the label requirements during a pesticide application and the directions on how to handle PPE once an application is completed. Some PPE can be washed, while others PPE is disposable. If you need to wash PPE, wash it separately from other clothing. The pesticide label may include instructions on how to decontaminate your washing machine afterwards, because the same things that make the product stick to plants tend to make them stick to things like our washers. Remember, it only takes one red sock to turn our laundry pink. Don't be a red sock. Did your laundry come out bright white or a shade of pink? How do we get the same results or prevent our lightish red attire? Let's document what we have done. Record keeping is required by some labels, state and federal law, and is a great way to document what you have done. Like a great recipe you found, you want to be able to duplicate the outcome, or if it was a flop, then know exactly what not to do. Proper record keeping can also assist medical professionals if treatment is needed. This slide includes information that you may find helpful to document pesticide applications, but there are also free online resources available. If you are curious, try searching WPS application records, and that should generate many different options to keep track of what pesticide was used, where it was used, when it was used, and how long to wait before you can return without PPE. REI, or restricted entry interval, is given in the label stating how long you have to stay out of a site or crop. That site may be your hoop house, where you're hardening off plants that mites are becoming an issue, or that pumpkin patch to fight off a fungus. How many of us wear our work I know when I am gardening or working on equipment, I wind up covered in whatever I'm working on. Pesticides can be found in various aspects of our daily lives. Let's talk about how a person can be exposed to pesticides. The primary route of pesticide exposure are through inhalation, dermal contact, oral exposure, and ocular exposure, as pictured in the slide. Inhalation exposure occurs when a person breathes in vapors, gas, or fumes of a pesticide. Dermal exposure occurs when a pesticide contacts skin. This is the most common type of exposure since skin is our largest organ and acts like a sponge. Oral exposure can happen when a person eats, smokes, or drinks around pesticides and forgets to wash after pesticide application. Additionally, exposure can occur by getting the pesticide in the eyes. Exposure can be reduced significantly by wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. Many of the above exposures can be reduced by soap and water for hand washing after you've handled your PPE. Remember, your skin is like a sponge and don't want to expose yourself. The red sock is always hiding somewhere. There are several symptoms that can indicate that a person has been exposed to a pesticide. However, some of these symptoms can mimic heat exhaustion. It is important to know the difference between the two. In a pesticide exposure, saliva and tears may be present. A person will have small pinpoint pupils, a slow pulse, and could eventually go into a coma. In heat stress, the person will have a dry mouth, no tears, dilated pupils, a fast pulse, and could also faint. We can protect ourselves and eliminate some, if not all of these symptoms by taking precautions, becoming educated, and increasing our safety awareness. That water break in the shade is not a waste, but rather an important tool to keep us safe. But remember to wash your hands before they go near eyes, mouth, nose, or other areas on our body. Just as red dye leaches into everything around us, so do pesticide residues on our hands and the rest of our bodies. Reading labels and protecting ourselves from sun and heat and pesticides will get us through the season. We wore our work and now we don't feel right. If you have any doubt, call 911. Life, unlike a pencil, does not allow us to erase our mistakes. Trying to tough it out may prove fatal. You will need the current label or labels for the products you were exposed to, the SDS or safety data sheets, formerly known as MSDS sheets, and your records. It is better to go with more than you need than to not have enough to answer medical staff's questions, especially if you become unable to talk and assist in your own care. It is important to know emergency numbers if 911 is not an option or you wish to consult the family physician first. Make a list of important numbers and hang them on the refrigerator or the shop wall next to the telephone or any other place easily accessed. There are many resources that are available discussing safe pesticide use, and I hope these organizations are like the fire extinguisher hanging in the shop. Good to have, but we all hope we never have to use it. The National Pesticide Information Center, or NPIC, has a great website for not only information on safety, but also on pest identification, pest control, integrated pest management, cleanup, and disposal. Maybe the next time you are rained out or need a break from Facebook or solitaire, check out the resources that are offered. Your local veterinarian is a great resource for pet or livestock possible pet poisoning questions. But an additional resource may be the ASPCA. Please note there may be a fee for use. We have made it through our discussion on safe pesticide use, so now it's time to turn to Worker Protection Requirements, or WPS. I think WPS and safe pesticide use go together like hamburgers and fries or milk and cookies. It takes training, practice, and teamwork. We want to move towards healthy, profitable crops and also keep ourselves, loved ones, and employees healthy at the same time. Plants need many things to grow, and WPS and pesticide safety use leads to a safer environment at work and home. So what is Worker Protection Standard, or WPS? WPS is a federal law aimed at reducing pesticide poisoning and injuries for those who work in agriculture. The goals of WPS are to inform, protect, and mitigate. The requirements of WPS provide agricultural workers and pesticide handlers with information to minimize exposure for themselves and their families. It protects workers and handlers from exposure while working, and it mitigates or reduces the effect of pesticide exposure. WPS also requires training before such employees begin to work. I mentioned that WPS requirements apply to agricultural workers and pesticide handlers. But are you an agricultural worker or a pesticide handler? Do you have employees that would qualify as a worker or handler? Do WPS requirements apply to your operation? Workers are those who performed hand labor tasks in pesticide treated crops, such as harvesting, thinning, or pruning. Handlers are those who mix, load, or apply pesticides. Seems like the two are completely different, right? Well, what if you have that helpful worker who sees the applicator is running low and brings in an open pesticide container or helps him reload? They can quickly cross over, and it might be a great idea to train everyone as a handler. The more people know about risk around them and how to work safely, the better we all are. That red sock is always a risk unless we plan for it. Owners and immediate family members are exempt from many WPS requirements. Immediate family is defined in the law and includes spouse, children, stepchildren, foster children, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, parents, step-parents, foster parents, father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother, sister, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, grandparents, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and first cousins. If the WPS requirements don't apply to you or your operation, you might want to take the extra steps required by WPS to protect people involved in your operation. You are balancing what is required with what is the right thing to do. You can take your already incredible operation and make it even better by applying WPS requirements. Plus, when your operation outgrows the family workforce, you are ready and well practiced in order to properly comply with new employees. Finally, if you need another resume for following WPS requirements, just remember you have spent a good portion of today learning how not to be a red sock. Through education and training, you can help prevent other people from becoming a red sock. Let's keep that red sock in sight. A great way to do this is to keep labels, SDS sheets, and application records in one place that is available to you at any time. Train our family or employees upon hiring with pesticide safety training and again before each season starts. Tell our family the who, what, when, where, and why on applications we are making. Some labels may require you to give them a sign to remind them to stay clear of a site we have treated until the REI or restricted entry interval has expired. Employers must provide decontamination supplies and PPE to help protect their employees. Emergency assistance includes providing contacts for medical facilities and transportation to a medical facility if needed. Even if WPS requirements are followed, you may still find yourself exposed to a pesticide during an application. Readily communicate to let others know what the plan is. Remember the 3 W's. What is being applied? When will the application be done? And where is the application happening? Only trained handlers should be allowed in or around the application site during the application, and they should all be wearing label required PPE. Be aware of environmental conditions such as wind or nearby water sources. Have decontamination supplies prepared to clean up after making an application or in the event of an exposure. Boots and gloves that may be that red sock if you do not clean them. Walking through a crop with herbicide on your boots may easily be seen a few hours or days as the injury becomes visible. Continue to keep people out of the application area until the restricted entry interval, or REI, has expired. PPE should be viewed as a red sock. Keep it separate and on the job site. Those boots may be carrying mud and other pesticides, and neither are a welcome visitor where unprotected people are. There are all kinds of resources that offer information about WPS. The Pesticide Education and Resource Center, or PERC, has some helpful manuals and guides. Many of them are free or relatively inexpensive. PERC even has videos and other training materials already available so that you do not have to create your own materials. The very nature of agriculture has a variety of red socks. We already have to worry about storms, insects, disease, crop failures, input cost, and even a pandemic, making it difficult to get our bounty of goods to the customer. Through training and education, we can build a protection or armor to protect those we love and the next generation that will work the land. Hopefully, I have provided you with some useful information, and I will leave you with a final resource before I open up for questions. The Kansas Department of Agriculture is a great resource, and the Pesticide and Fertilizer Program is happy to answer any questions that you may have. I appreciate your time and attention. What questions do you have?
Kent, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much for everything that you've done and putting that together with that. And actually, we did have a couple questions that came in directly to me on the chat today. And the first one is, would my daughter's fiance be exempt from the WPS requirements? Would that fiance be exempt?
That's a great question. And at the time, as a fiance, he would not. Once he becomes a son-in-law, he would. But it's probably a great idea to give him training on either side of that.
Okay, great. So just to reinforce that. But then what requirements would be in place for training after they get married?
Well, like I said, we're trying to eliminate red socks altogether. So once he becomes the fiance, technically he is exempt from several of the requirements. However, it's still a pretty good idea because you hope that the son-in-law sticks around for a while. And it's a good idea to probably give him some training. I would recommend as a handler, even if he has no handling task, at least he'll have the extra knowledge to avoid exposure.
Well, great. So you talked about some training materials in your presentation. So where can I find, or those that are logged in or watch this at a later date, where can we find those additional training materials? And with that, are they available in other languages?
They actually are. The PERC, or the Pesticide Education Resource Collaboration, has a website that has training materials in English and Spanish, as well as about 15 other languages last time I looked. So if you have somebody that speaks something that's not on the list, they can probably come up with something. There's videos, there's just about anything you could need, including handouts. So it's a great website. Again, that's PERC, P-E-R-C, not K. So if you want to Google that, that really comes in handy.
So as we talk about training and making sure everybody has got things going, how often is a worker or a handler, is that training required? How often?
Okay, when you bring them onto the facility, they need to have training before they do anything. I mean, this is basically like your orientation type deal. Once they are trained, then every year, probably before the season starts, it's just a good idea, and it's also required to go ahead and go through that training again. There's a video you can watch, and it's amazing after you get a year's worth of knowledge in what new questions come up.
Oh, I can just imagine. I even have more questions as we get going with this. So I'm looking at KDA as, a whole, and for those out in the state, who looks over those WPS requirements in Kansas? And if they're looking things over, who do they call if they have questions?
Great question. The Kansas Department of Agriculture and the EPA both can and do conduct worker protection standard inspections. If you have questions, please give the Kansas Department of Ag a call. We're here to help you at any time. Kelly and Josh is always around. Myself is always around, but never hesitate to call. We really enjoy any question we get.
Well, great. And with that, the Department of Agriculture is open 8 to 5. With it, we all have voicemail, we have email. We'll check that during regular business hours. So thank you very much with that. So you offered a lot of great information today. And so I was just curious, does today's webinar count for credit or for worker or handler training?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, no, it does not. The training is much more detailed than we're put on today. Today was more of a broad stroke, and the handler or worker training would be a more of a precision training thing. It's all good information, but like I said, if you're going to do handler or worker training, you really need to use an approved EPA course.
Great. So we just had one that came in here directly that's asked from one of our participants, can they provide that worker or training for themselves and for their team with that? How does that work?
Good question again. If you're a certified applicator, and that can be private or commercial, you can provide the training, or you can attend a train the trainer event. There's both in person and online. With either one of those or both, depending on which way you want to go, you are allowed to do training. I would recommend the trainer. I've been a certified applicator since 2000. I was lucky enough to attend the train the trainer event last fall. I can tell you that I'm way more prepared to do training with the train the trainer event than I was a certified applicator. So I would recommend one or both. Like I said, there's never too much knowledge or too much safety. Great.
One of the things that you covered in the video, and we're always asked additional questions on decontamination. Would one of the folks that work with Department of Ag or make sure on this worker protection standards, would they have to purchase one of those decontamination stations, or is it something they could build themselves?
Another super question. A lot of times you already have a lot of the equipment on site. I know in the operations I used to work at, we typically always had a shower, because who wants to go home wearing your work? The wife gets really upset. So you probably already have the soap and water. If you're running a spray rig or something like that, a lot of it already has 125 gallons of wash down water. iWash is often seen, or there's an iWash station somewhere. That'd be the one thing you might have to purchase, but it's kind of, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can plumb one into your existing. You can buy a portable. There are a lot of ways to do this. I've had a couple just recently that built their own, and I mean, it's not fancy. I mean, you're not gold plating the appliances, but it's something that will come in handy for more than just the pesticide.
Well, great. We have time for about one more question, and it kind of actually fits in great here as we're talking about requirements. Eyewear. A lot of people have glasses or sunglasses that they wear. Yeah. Would folks have to buy special prescription eyewear that have the side brow and the temple protections on that? How is that viewed and handled?
You've got a couple options. One, what I've done in the past is they make side brow and temple protection. They're like clip-ons to your existing frames. Now, I'm not going to say they work on all frames. It depends on which kind you've got. My cheaper ones, they work pretty well on. If you buy the really fancy ones, maybe not so much, but you can do that. You can wear goggles over your glasses. You're not going to win any fashion contest, but that works. Face shields are also another option. It just really depends. Look at that label and then see what's also available. And the next time you go to buy a new pair of prescription glasses, maybe look at updating your script to where it would be compliant.
Well, great. Well, Kent, thank you very much for your time, the entire pesticide and fertilizer group, Kelly and the team behind the scenes, helping get everything collected for information. The PowerPoint was wonderful, great with that. So I thank you and the entire team. Looking through the chat, there aren't any questions that have been listed besides those that came directly to me, which we've covered. So with that, I think today's program has wrapped up, and I appreciate everybody's time. We will get this posted on the website. So with that, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.